Hello individuals, this video is going to be a response to a video that I had watched a while ago. The original video by Steph Sanjardi is How to Date a Trans Woman, and it was published about 2 years ago, and I've had this idea for a while now, and I wanted to respond to it on like how to date a trans guy because I am a trans guy and I know how to date like one. I've never dated one because I'm not into men, but I am one. So clearly I am terrible at starting videos, is what I learned. So I had a mental list of all of the things that I wanted to say after I had watching her video, but I forgot a lot of it, so I decided to look up to see what other people might have said. And so I'm going to be adding a little bit of my own twist to this. I found an article, it was like Cosmopolitan, for crying out loud, and it was written by a trans guy, and it's basically like things you should know about dating a trans guy or loving a trans guy or something like that. And so I wanted to include that. So I'm using that list, but I'm also keeping in mind that video that I saw. Wow, I rambled on. Alright, so first thing, and something that I think is really important, is that dating us doesn't make you gay. Now I'm specifically talking about hetero relationships and not anything else. So if you are a woman and you're dating a trans guy, it doesn't mean that you're now a lesbian. It doesn't mean, if you were straight, you're still straight. We're real men, despite the fact that we might have been assigned something at birth. Like, despite all of that, we're still real men, and dating us or being interested in us or sleeping with us or any of that doesn't mean anything about your sexual orientation. It just means that you're now seeing a trans guy. So congrats. The second thing that was in the article that I found really interesting is that it isn't the best of both worlds. Now, trans men most of the time are socialized as girls. I mean, I should probably talk for myself and use I statements, but I was socialized like a girl, so I know what it's like to be a girl because I grew up basically believing I was one, and I grew up only being taught what it was like to be one and to live in the world as one. But that doesn't mean I certainly do not identify as a girl at all. So it's not really being the best of both worlds, but I can say that it comes to an advantage because I I understand what it's like to be one, and if I were to date a woman, I've been there before, so I mean there's like an advantage to that, but it doesn't mean that you're getting two things. You're not getting two genders, you're getting a person with one gender, if that makes any sense. Maybe even it makes sense in my head. The third one, which I found interesting, was part of the article, and it was we are not all into girls, and it's just something that I wanted to address because when it comes to dating, I've only ever really been interested. That's a lie. I've been interested in quite a couple of things, but I've only ever dated women, like in the past, and I've only ever like spoken to women, so that's about as far as I know. I'm also into gender non-conforming people, but for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to talk about my interest in women. So I do agree in the sense that, I'm so big on the fact that sexual orientation and gender identity are not the same thing. And I have a lot of trans friends who happen to be queer as well. I don't identify as that. And despite the fact that I'm not completely straight, I don't feel comfortable being labeled as queer. This is not a video about my sexual orientation. The point of this video, the point of bringing that up was that I just wanted to emphasize that there is a difference, but that's really about it. I mean, for the purpose of this video, it's not completely relevant. Right. The fourth thing that I had included in this was support, and trans men need support. All people need support, but trans people and specifically need support, and it's not easy being trans, having to deal with you know, socially transitioning and medically transitioning, if that's a thing, and just dealing with all of the dysphoria and oppression and all of that great stuff. You need someone who's gonna be willing to support us. It doesn't mean that you have to understand what it's like. It doesn't mean that you have to like have lived, you know, have to be trans to date someone who's trans. It doesn't mean that you have to know someone who's trans beforehand, or, you know, X, Y, and Z, but just be supportive and be there. And I mean, all relationships require communication, and I can't emphasize that enough about how important communication is. And so it's best to communicate with your partner on how you can support them, whether it be just validating them, which should be its own point, or it be that you be there and like maybe inject them with their hormones, or, you know, or that you're there when they're like rallying for trans rights, whatever it may be. The support comes different for each person, but it's important to know that you're, just like in every other relationship, it's important to support your partner. And then it comes into the next point that I want to talk about, is validation, and how it's important to validate your partner, especially when someone's trans. I think that's one of the most important things that we might ever need, is a validation that we are who we say we are. We are who we are, and sometimes it, you know, gets a little hard to remember that, at least for myself, because I'm like living both lives, and it's, despite the fact that I was like, this is, oh my god, but like I'm living a lie, and so I'm living two different lives, and I'm oftentimes need someone to be like, to sort of validate who I am, because I start doubting myself. I'm like, because also oftentimes I get misgendered, you know, I don't have like whatever the look that society thinks I should have, and so validation is super important. We don't all have surgery, and we don't all take hormones. If I were to start dating someone now, they'd have to understand that hormones take a little while to get, and it's a process, and the changes are a process, and it's going through puberty again, and that doesn't mean that I'm any less valid. I have a couple of other trans friends who aren't on hormones, or who haven't had any surgeries. I haven't had any surgeries. I'm being like completely 100% on this video, but surgeries aren't what makes the man a man, if that makes any sense. Not everyone opts to have surgery. Not everyone can have surgery. Insurance doesn't always cover it. It's extraordinarily expensive. These processes are extraordinarily expensive, and not everyone wants to have them, but that doesn't mean that they're any less valid. And that's something else to remember. Seventh one is sex isn't scary, and so I kind of want to bring in something that Steph had said in her own video. For trans women, because there are higher risks of getting killed, especially in this country. I mean, she's from Toronto, but in the US there's like alarmingly high rates of trans women, especially of color, being murdered. And oftentimes it's a story of you know, there's always like a cis guy who finds out about this, and they're threatened, and then they kill them. And there have been trans men that have been murdered, but there's not a lot of them. But that doesn't invalidate the fact that it gets scary, and, you know, something like a one-night stand isn't necessarily the easiest thing. Are there trans men who have one-night stands? Sure. I don't know any, but I'm sure that there are. I know that, like, a lot of times for trans people, there's this whole decision of whether or not they want to tell someone, and that often comes with passing privilege. If you pass, then it becomes your decision, versus like if you don't necessarily pass by society standards, and it kind of becomes obvious. And having one-night stands isn't always the option that you have, and that kind of, I guess for some people it kind of sucks, because you don't have that opportunity to just sleep with anyone, because you have to have this conversation of like, I might not have the body parts that you expect. I might not be able to do things that you might want me to do. And so sex with someone who's trans is different for everyone. Each person is individual, just like when it comes to cis people. Not everyone has sex the same way, not everyone is, you know, is into the same things. It's just all about communication and about understanding what each person likes and what each person wants and what each person does. Number 8, and I'm just sort of going to summarize the rest of the other points that I got from the article, is to not be ashamed. And I mean, you know, if you're dating a trans person, you are dating someone who's trans, and that's even if they don't identify as that, it's something that you can't erase. These are medical procedures that you have to go through if they go through it, and like, it doesn't mean that you have to go and tell everyone, hey, I'm dating someone who, you know, X, Y, and Z, but it does mean that you have to be understanding of that, and that you can't like try to erase someone else's past. It really depends on the person. If they're out, then understand that they're out, but if they're not out, then respect that, just like you should with everybody in life, regardless if they're your partner or not. You should respect their decisions to be open with whatever they want to be open with in terms of their personal life, and it all requires communication. If they're like, hey, you can tell everyone and their mom that I'm trans, and tell everyone and their mom that they're trans, but it really does depend on the person. But it doesn't mean that it's something to be ashamed of. Just because we're trans, it doesn't mean that we're different. I mean, you know, it doesn't mean that we're not humans, doesn't mean that I mean, everyone's different, but it doesn't mean that we're this other category. We're still people. And I guess the last one that I have to say is just an emphasis on that we are real men, and it shouldn't be invalidating to date someone who's trans just because they are trans. And I know for me, and I guess I can make a separate video on what it's been like dating on my end. It's been difficult because I am short and I have a higher voice, and I, you know, don't exactly pass, and I don't have cis privileges or passing privileges, and it sucks. And sometimes I've noticed that with cis women in specific, not all of them, I don't want to generalize, but a lot of the times they want a specific view of a man, and because someone might not complete that, then they just don't go for it. And there's things that you could be missing out on. This is not a video about me and my dating life, but I did just want to mention that. My throat is dry. So if you watch up to here, thank you so much. Subscribe, like, a comment. You can give an individual their wings, and if you subscribe, you can join your family. And who doesn't want to learn to fly? And until next video,